mom and I were fighting a lot. We were just button heads, or more aggressive, more just loud and constant. And I just hated life and hated the world and didn't know who to blame it on. My teenage daughter was diagnosed with mental illness. Actually, she was diagnosed with many illnesses, and my daughter arrested on some pretty serious charges of conspiracy to commit murder.
My name is Stefanie Hoffman. I'm a journalist and a PR professional.
The last few years have become very involved in advocacy work for mental health of children and giving them mental health resources. And the reason why I've been so involved in this is because my teenage daughter, was diagnosed with mental illness.
And she suffered mental illness most of her life. She's struggled through various phases since she was a little girl. And I'd seen it here and there in her anger and her distance from the family, in her oppositional attitudes, but also just kind of dismissed it as her being a pre-teenager and being very strong-willed. I think it really hit home, though, when I got a call from her father and asking, or rather telling me, that he was sending her to me.
So basically, borderline personality disorder is characterized by an instability in mood, impulsivity, lack of self-image. My name is Rupa, and I'm 41 years old. I live in San Francisco, and I've lived here for about 14 years. When I describe this to my friends, the way I call it, I kind of refer to it as like an over-emotionality or like a hypersensitivity. A lot of these people are referred to as histrionic or impulsive, or a lot of times people will say, they really attract drama. But really there's something deeper going on here.
So something I want to talk about is the average delay. The average delay between the onset of symptoms and treatment for children is about 8 to 10 years. And this might seem like a lot, but in reality, when you take stigma combined with lack of knowledge about children's mental health in general and lack of access, the statistic isn't that surprising. A lot of this is attributed to stigma, as you might imagine. In general, many parents are reluctant to admit that their child might have a mental health condition.
How adequate is the current mental health care system for juveniles that are sent to a correctional facility?
It's not. We have a long way to go. I think there are people within the system that are very in tune with trying to address mental health issues in the juvenile system. But
currently, I am assigned to the Felony General Litigation Unit at the Hall of Justice. But previous to this new felony assignment, I was assigned to the Juvenile Unit for almost 7 years. And as part of my duties as a juvenile prosecutor, it included serious violent felonies, as well as the domestic violence, family violence unit. The significance of a caseload like mine, especially dealing with some of the issues surrounding mental health as it relates to the delinquency system, is that these cases are more intensive and they take a lot more time to resolve. They take a lot more time to reach a disposition and work with the collaborative players. So in that way, the caseload is not as number high as you would think, but the intensity of a case would be obviously much more great.
I'm Steve Hinshaw. I'm a professor of psychology at UC Berkeley and a professor of psychiatry at UC San Francisco, and I'm very interested in children's mental health and stigma and what we can do about the situation we're in.
What mental health care options are there for young children, and what mental health care options are there for teens?
We live in the United States, and right here we live in California, and here we live in Northern California, and it's a melange. There is not a central organized system. It depends on money and access, it depends on insurance, there's private care and there's public care.
But I think if you look at it from a holistic point of view, if you're looking at it very globally, we don't have enough resources. There's a lack of training for prosecutors, a lack of training for judges, there's a lack of training for many people in the system, and then there's not enough funding to provide a level of support.
Oftentimes, what happens is we will look at the nature of the charge, we will look at the age of the offender, we will look at the services that they've received, their family situation. It's a very much of a holistic approach when it comes to juvenile prosecution, very different than what you might think a prosecution would look like.
Hi, my name is Eugene Kenatal. I'm a psychiatric social worker. I've been working with adults with mental illness over the past couple of years, providing clinical case management. From my own experience working with clients who have borderline personality disorder symptoms, I find that most of it is marked by interpersonal difficulties, being able to relate to people, being able to express and be aware of their own emotions.
So borderline personality disorder is, to me, I call it sort of an umbrella. And there are a lot of disorders and symptoms and illnesses that can come under that umbrella. For me, under the borderline personality disorder umbrella, I also suffered from major depression. I also suffered from OCD. And that's the reason this is so hard to diagnose, is usually people will easily be diagnosed with some sort of addiction, or with bulimia or anorexia or alcoholism or OCD or bipolar disorder. And a lot of these have a very high co-occurrence with borderline. And it's easy to see those and say, and stamp it and say, oh, this is bipolar or this is depression. But the thing is that these 9 symptoms have over 200 different ways of presenting themselves. And so they often are kind of lumped with a different illness.
So usually with personality disorders, and specifically with borderline personality disorder, medication doesn't resolve the issues. And sometimes there's confusion, what they call a differential diagnostic dilemma, meaning we think it's borderline, but it might be something else. Maybe it's hormonal problems, maybe it's bipolar disorder. And sometimes there's confusion between borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder.
My name is Ivania and I am 28. My first diagnosis was at 16 and it was for depression as well as ADHD and OCD. While I wasn't treated initially, I was first diagnosed at 16. My guardians at the time were very religious and didn't believe in mental illness. So they took me to be blessed by a priest in their church instead of letting me take medication the doctor had prescribed.
And it hasn't been that long, really, that people have identified this disorder correctly. And the name hasn't been around that long. And even for me, I knew I was depressed, but when I was so proactively trying to get better when I was 14 and 16, no one knew what borderline personality disorder was.
So with bipolar disorder, you can prescribe medication like mood stabilizers and antidepressants, and you'll see positive changes in the people for the most part. Their mood their depressive features will get better, and the mania or the agitation and mania that they have will subside. If you give medications to a person with borderline personality disorder, it doesn't necessarily change anything. They don't improve. They don't find any improvement or change as a result of medication. Because it's a pervasive part of their personality structure, it's not necessarily a hormonal imbalance or any kind of thing of that nature that can be changed through medication.
In due time, when I was 21, I noticed that I was doing things that were out of my mental control. I attributed this to just being my personality. I didn't seek help after that until I was 21. After an onslaught of errors at work, which was not really the norm for me, my manager took me aside and asked me to get professional help.
So it's still fairly new, and it kind of represents itself in so many different ways that it's really hard to diagnose.
Depending whose numbers you want to believe, the number of young people that are in the criminal justice system that have mental health problems could be pretty significant. I've heard it's anywhere from 50 to 60, 70%, depending on who does the numbers. Some of those kids have really acute problems. Arguably, again, some of the numbers are like almost a quarter of those kids have really acute mental health problems. And generally, those are not addressed very well.
Sadly, there are many negative repercussions for not intervening early, and here are a few of the most serious. More than 90% of youth who die by suicide have had a mental health condition. 70% of youth in juvenile justice systems have a mental health condition, and that arguably might be a little bit low. 50% of students over 14 with a mental health condition drop out of high school.
The big issue is that for the number of children who have serious mental health concerns, it seems as though under half get any mental health care, and under half of them get what we call evidence-based care. This is the United States. We have big budgets. We have sophisticated knowledge about mental health conditions. The irony is that when kids and teens and adults get treatment, they get better. They really improve. But too many don't get the care they need, or they get care that isn't up to the scientific standards we have.
And part of that, again, I think is a lack of funding, is a lack of training for the people that are involved in the system. And there's actually, I think also there's a lack of enabling legislation to ensure that this is being done right. I think if we as a society were to look at mental health problems not necessarily as a criminal justice problem, but as a health problem, I think that a lot of our solutions will be very different. And I think that we can do so and still maintain appropriate levels of safety for the community.
Over the past few years, we navigated through the juvenile justice system, we navigated through the mental health system, and we struggled. It was definitely an uphill climb.
So if you've had a kid with learning or emotional or behavioral problems, and you've wanted to get help, you've got to overcome some of the resistance and stigma. My kid's got a mental disorder. Do we want to come out of the closet with this? This might be scary to admit. And then B, once you do that, once you get to that point, you have to navigate a system that is at best filled with hurdles because it's not easy to get the right care.
So much. You actually see that a lot of times trauma-based individuals who have gone through what they've gone through end up doing something in society to pay it forward and really are able to take their life experience, and it makes them so much better in the practice in which they end up following.
My name is Carolyn, I'm 20. I spent 4 years in a residential treatment center.
Okay.
So
And
I wanted to be a therapist in a juvenile hall
oh wow, nice.
when I get my degree.
Uh-huh.
So
And
it kind of shaped I came on the other side. I was on the other side of the table.
okay.
And I want to be on the therapist side. There's so many people that can't get help because they don't have money, or they don't have resources, or they don't know the resources. I want to bring awareness to people that this kind of stuff is real, and because a lot of people like to say, oh, it's like, it's all about your mindset and how you think, and it's really not. Like the richest person who has everything given to them and is treated the best could still be depressed and still have problems. So
Right.
it's really not about just your mindset. It's about your chemical wiring, your brain, and there are ways to handle it. And the main point of it is I want to help kids, before they turn 18, and kind of be like, hey, I was in this situation too. Like, let me tell you how I got through it.
Right.
As much as I can. Somebody always needs somebody who went through hell and back
Yeah.
to show them that it's possible to come back.
Right.
So when all this started, mental illness was the farthest thing from my mind. I had no idea that my daughter was suffering. It was just not in my purview at all. It became mental illness. My daughter's mental illness came to my attention several years ago. When she was living with her father, and she was struggling. She was getting straight Fs. She was running away from school. She was getting in fights. And then I was living in California at the time. My daughter and her father were living in Oregon. And then one day I get a call from her father saying my daughter needed to live with me. And that was a total shock. But he said that he had intercepted her from running away with an older 18-year-old man. And she and her little girlfriend were both going to run away with him, and they were both going to leave the state, apparently. And he had seen text messages on her phone indicating what they were going to do, and saw her backpack packed. And he said he didn't know what to do with her, so she was going to come to live with me in California. And of course, the door was always open. I was thrilled to have her, and thought with some structure, with some guidance, with some love, she could maybe turn things around. So she came to live with me, and my boyfriend at the time, and his 2 kids in California. It was just a matter of time before she met somebody else. an older man. This time he was 20, she was 13. And they began sneaking around behind our backs. She had him over at the house. We'd come home and the screen would be punched out, and there'd be punch marks in the doors. And we didn't know what was going on, but we knew something was going on. Then one day, morning, we woke up, and she was going to a camp, a culinary camp. And I got her up early for camp, and she was gone. She was missing. And both my partner and I, we called the police. We took the day off work. We looked for her everywhere. We went to, got phone records, and we spent the day looking for her. And she was eventually found with this person, this 20-year-old. And the police separated them. They arrested him for statutory rape, and they returned her to our house. But even though she was safe and sound, I knew that something was very, very wrong.
But because juvenile theory is grounded in the fact that we try to do what's in the best interest for the child, and that's, you oftentimes do not see mental illness emerge in adolescence. There are so many tests that do not capture the type of mental illness that later shows itself in an adolescent and in a later adolescent.
Furthermore, they are more susceptible to suicidality, self-injurious behaviors like cutting, and also they're very attuned to if someone is going to reject them or abandon them, and they're very afraid of it, and so they react in self-destructive ways.
Splitting is what we consider a defense mechanism, an extreme form of black and white thinking. There's all good or all bad. And this applies to oneself, other people, the world, any number of factors.
So, it wouldn't be uncommon to see, depression, anxiety disorder, mood disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia, but you may not see it in its full form because the child is not fully formed.
I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
It's kind of like bipolar. I mean, except for the mood changes are closer together. I could be happy 1 hour and then be completely depressed the other hour and really have no reason. It also, attention. Attention deficit. It comes with that, and then also fear of abandonment, and you idolize people and demonize other people. It's kind of, there's no in between. There's really no medication for personality disorder, or lack of personality disorder. There's medications for anxiety disorder and the ADHD and the symptoms of it, but it's really just with treatment and therapy that helps the borderline. Pretty clear that the problems are always going to be there.
Right.
No matter what, no matter how much medication I go through, no matter how much therapy I go through, the problems are always going to be there. It's just a matter of how I deal with them.
Yeah.
We'll never really totally know. We scratch the surface, right, over the years,
Yeah.
in all these things that we've done, but we don't truly know what makes somebody tick.
My mom and I were fighting a lot, and I was dating this 20-year-old, and put all my faith into him, put all my whatever, all my, just kind of, I idolized him, and made him the most important person in the world. When the time came where it got pushed over the edge, and so me and him kind of just joking at the time, kind of fucking hate my mom, I wish she was gone, kind of bullshit. Everybody does at some point, but me being me, I took it 20 steps further, and it's kind of yeah, you're right, I do wish she was gone, and why not? I guess it's either me or her, and because I was feeling super suicidal at the time, every day. When you're 20 and somebody 13-year-old comes up to you and says, I want to kill my mom, what do you say? Right. No, what are you talking about, you crazy person? Don't even think about that, but that wasn't the case, so I can't take blame off of him either. But it was also, I knew what I was doing, 100%, knew what I was doing, but at the same time I didn't. At the same time it was this is the only option, I don't know what else to do. Now it's a mistake,
Right.
Because I can see clearly, but as I'm older, but then it was, my way out. It was something that I don't even know why honestly, I can't really tell you why I was dating a 20-year-old.
There was no way around the seriousness of the case. She had an active part.
We were fighting a lot. I had been there for 8 months, and we were just butting heads, and it would get more and more aggressive, more just loud and constant, and I just hated life and hated the world and didn't know who to blame it on at the time. And yeah, it was just kind of was like first person really who came to mind was my mom. You know, you were in my life, whatever.
She had an active part. We had text message, thousands of pages of text messages, all types of other evidence to show that she had planned and basically helped her boyfriend execute this. Mother goes into the house. And so what happened was they had come home from a grocery store. Carolyn, the girl, the daughter, went up to her neighbor's house knowing what was going to happen. Mother feels uneasy. She does. She tells you later that she just had this weird sense. She goes into Carolyn's room for some reason. And she's in the house, and defendant 2, the adult, jumps out of the closet and stabs her. Luckily, the stab was not in any major order. Then he runs out, and rather than Carolyn going to see her mother or feeling remorse at that point, again, the mental health issues are a factor in this, she runs with her boyfriend, runs after her boyfriend.
I ran outside, ran into the room. Don't even remember the room. I did actually look into the room, but I don't remember the room at all. But so that happened, and then she, the screaming happened, and then everything stopped. And he ran, and she came upstairs and stuff. I got attacked. It was all so fast and blank. I started running, and then I just ran. Ducked behind bushes from cops and found me. They ended up I went to every house and asked to use their phone. Of course, they called 911. There's a crazy, drugged out girl on my lawn. She's kind of weird. Little girl or whatever. So they obviously pinpointed the phone calls and got to the beach. And I didn't find him. I was running after Angel. And I couldn't find him. He ran to the beach and he hid, and I didn't know where he was. Ran over here, looked down. I yelled his name a few times because I didn't know at that point where he was. Gate was closed. So I walked out. Didn't want to jump the fence, not knowing where he was. So I ran back up.
After the attack, the attack changed my life forever, and my life will probably never be the same. I now define my life, everything that happened before the attack and everything that happened after the attack.
But that weekend, my mom tried to visit me. As soon as I saw her, no, couldn't see her. Tears, didn't even leave the door, was shaking 100%. I definitely believe in things happen for a reason, and she didn't die for a reason. And that reason's becoming clearer to me, obviously, as I grow up. I got really lucky. I could have been put away for 11 years, longer even. They could have charged me as an adult, whatever they wanted to do. But they saw, whatever they saw in me, I don't know. Whatever they saw, they realized that I could be saved. So I got lucky. And I could be saved. And I could transform, and everyone can. They saw something in me, and so they said, yeah, till she's 18, we'll figure it out, from there. But I think I grew up. That's really all it is. I grew up and I realized what I did was wrong. And not only was it wrong, but it was, there was other ways to handle it. And I'm an adult, and I can, I have other resources, and I can tell people why I'm upset now. Or I cannot tell people why I'm upset, and I can just deal with it on my own like an adult. And I have a different view on life, and
having Stefanie come to grips with it, realizing in a way it wasn't personal, as hard as that is to think in a case like this, how could it not be personal? My kid tried to kill me.
Yeah.
But to think beyond that, and the fact that Stefanie was able to think beyond that and love her daughter so much that she saw it through to the end is probably one of the most promising things I've ever seen in a reunification of a mother and a daughter
Yeah, so about 7 years later, I'm turning 21 soon. I have a really good job at a moving company. My own car, making payments. I'm doing very well. Live in a house. I have dogs. I have animals. I'm happy. I go to therapy. I'm taking medication to help regulate my mood swings and emotions, and doing very well. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. When things go wrong, when I was 13, 14, when all this happened, I thought I was hopeless, that life was over, that my whole entire life was going to be ruined. I'm not going to have any opportunities or anything like that. And I've come to find myself very wrong about that. I've had so many opportunities on so many different levels. I still struggle every day with, mood swings, emotions. The initial reaction when something goes bad is always to react badly, is always to freak out. But, as I've gotten older, as I've matured, as I've recognized what I did and where I came from, and now that I can control that a little bit better, I've come to handle myself very well.
And I think as many people who go through these kinds of traumas or a tragedy, it changes you. It changes my perspective. And one of the ways it has done that is wanting to use our experience to be able to share that with others so they can learn from me, so they don't have to walk the same path we do, so that they know that they're not alone. I think one of the hardest things for me, even before the attack, was feeling like I was all by myself, and feeling like my daughter was by herself, and feeling like no one could understand. So many children diagnosed with a mental illness, and we're doing this film for them.
I remember before you talked. I remember when you couldn't walk. I remember when you first stood up on your own. Those days come and go so fast. Precious moments never last. Now that the years have come to pass, I guess it's time for me to go. But don't be afraid of what's coming. No, don't be afraid of what's coming next, baby. I taught you all I know, and I got to watch you grow. Now you got babies of your own, I hope you'll watch them too. They'll be strong, just let them fight. Tell them it's okay to cry. Try to teach them wrong from right, the way that I showed you. And don't be afraid of what's coming. No, don't be afraid of what's coming next, baby. And don't be scared these dark days to come, 'cause I'll be there long after I'm gone. And I know you'll be fine. I can't wait to see, 'cause you're strong and you're kind, just like